They say every building has a story, but some buildings have secrets that refuse to stay buried. This is the story of the Riverside Apartments, a crumbling six-story building in downtown Chicago that should have been condemned years ago. And this is the story of Sarah Chen, a struggling photographer who made the mistake of signing a lease for apartment 6F, the apartment where the last tenant never actually left. Sarah Chen wasn't superstitious. At 28 years old, she prided herself on being practical, logical, rational. Ghosts weren't real. Hauntings were just stories people told to explain away drafty windows and creaky floorboards. So when the landlord, an elderly man named Mr. Kovacs, offered her apartment 6F at half the normal rent, she didn't ask questions. She just signed the lease. It's perfect. Top floor, great light for photography. I'll take it. Mr. Kovacs's hand trembled slightly as he handed her the keys. His eyes, watery and gray, wouldn't quite meet hers. The previous tenant, she left some things, personal items. You can throw them away if you want. Or keep them, doesn't matter to me. What kind of things? Just things. You'll see. Sarah moved in on a Tuesday in October. The building was even worse than she'd expected. The elevator hadn't worked in months, forcing her to haul boxes up 6 flights of stairs. The hallway carpet was stained and torn. The walls were painted a depressing shade of yellow that had faded to something like old mustard. But when she opened the door to 6F, she understood why Mr. Kovacs had offered such a low rent. The apartment was completely furnished, and not just furnished, but lived in. A coffee mug sat on the kitchen counter, still half, full of liquid that had long since grown a fuzzy green mold. Mail was scattered across the dining table, unopened bills and catalogs addressed to someone named Rebecca Winters. Clothes hung in the closet, toiletries lined the bathroom shelf. It was as if someone had simply vanished in the middle of their daily routine. What the hell? Sarah pulled out her phone to call Mr. Kovacs, then stopped. Half rent. She was 3 months behind on her credit cards. Her photography business was barely surviving. She could throw away someone's old stuff. That wasn't a big deal. People left things behind all the time. She spent the first day clearing out the apartment, stuffing Rebecca Winters' life into black garbage bags. The clothes went first, then the toiletries, then the kitchen items. But when she got to the bedroom, she found something that made her pause. A journal, leather, bound, worn at the edges, filled with dense handwriting in blue ink. Sarah knew she shouldn't read it. It was an invasion of privacy, but curiosity won out. She sat on the floor, her back against the wall, and opened to the first page. January 3rd, moved into 6F today. Finally have my own place. No more roommates. No more drama, just me and my art. This is going to be perfect. Sarah flipped through the pages. Rebecca Winters had been a painter. The journal was filled with sketches and notes about color theory and technique. She'd been excited about the apartment, about the light, about the view of the river. For the first few months, the entries were cheerful, optimistic, full of plans and dreams. Then something changed. March 15th. I keep hearing footsteps above me, but there's nothing above apartment 6F except the roof. I asked Mr. Kovacs about it. He said it's just the building settling, but buildings don't settle in footsteps. Buildings don't pace back and forth for hours. March 22nd, the footsteps are getting worse. Now they're during the day too. I can't paint, I can't think, just constant walking, back and forth, back and forth. I went up to the roof to check. Nothing there, no one there. But when I came back down, I could still hear them right above my head. April 2nd. Something touched my shoulder last night. I was standing at the kitchen sink and I felt fingers. Cold fingers pressing into my shoulder. I turned around and no one was there, but I felt it. I know I felt it. Sarah's hands were shaking. She told herself it was just the rambling of someone with mental health issues. Isolation did things to people. Living alone in a run-down apartment could make anyone paranoid. But something about the handwriting, the way it became more frantic and desperate with each entry, made her skin crawl. April 10th. I see her now in the mirrors, in the windows, in the corner of my vision. A woman in a white dress. She's always wet, always dripping. She stands in the corner and watches me. When I look directly at her, she's gone. But I can feel her, always watching, always there. April 15th. I tried to leave, packed my things, called my sister, but when I opened the door, she was standing in the hallway, the woman in white, blocking my way. Her face was gray, her eyes were black, water dripped from her hair, from her clothes, pooling on the floor. She opened her mouth and water poured out, gallons of it. I slammed the door and called 911. When the police came, there was nothing, no woman, no water. They thought I was crazy. The entries became shorter after that, more erratic. Sometimes just single sentences. Sometimes just sketches of a woman with hollow eyes and water dripping from her hair. She won't let me leave. She's in my dreams. She wants me to stay. She wants me to understand. She wants me to join her. The final entry was dated May 1st, just 6 months ago. I understand now, the woman in white. Her name was Alice Brennan. She lived here in 1987. She drowned in the bathtub, but she never left. She's been here all along, waiting, and now she's found me. She says I can't leave. She says this is my home now. She says the entry ended there, mid-sentence. Sarah flipped through the rest of the journal, but the remaining pages were blank. What happened to you, Rebecca? Sarah pulled out her phone and searched for Rebecca Winters. It took a few minutes, but she found it. A missing person report filed by Rebecca's sister in May. Rebecca Winters, 26 years old, had disappeared from her apartment. No signs of foul play, no evidence of where she'd gone. The investigation had gone cold. Sarah closed the journal and stood up, her legs unsteady. This was insane. Rebecca had clearly been having some kind of breakdown. The story about Alice Brennan was probably just a delusion. There was no woman in white. There was no ghost. Sarah would throw away the journal, finish clearing out the apartment, and forget this ever happened. But that night, as she lay in her sleeping bag on the living room floor, too tired to set up her bed, she heard them. Footsteps, slow, deliberate footsteps coming from directly above her, back and forth, steady as a heartbeat. Sarah sat up, her heart pounding. She grabbed her phone and turned on the flashlight, shining it at the ceiling. The footsteps continued. She could hear them clearly now, the creak of floorboards, the weight of someone walking, but that was impossible. There was nothing above 6F except the roof. Stop it. You're psyching yourself out. It's just the buildings settling. Old buildings make noise, but the footsteps didn't sound like settling. They sounded like someone walking, someone pacing back and forth for hours. Sarah didn't sleep that night. The next morning, exhausted and irritable, she went up to the roof to investigate. The door was locked, rusted shut. She had to kick it 3 times before it finally gave way. The roof was empty, just tar and gravel and a few abandoned lawn chairs. No evidence that anyone had been up here in years. But when she went back down to her apartment and stood in the center of the living room, she heard them again, the footsteps, directly above her, as if someone was standing right where she'd just been standing. Okay, this is officially creepy. Sarah spent the day researching the building. The Riverside Apartments had been built in 1952. Over the decades, it had seen dozens of tenants come and go. She found old newspaper articles about a fire in the 1970s that killed 2 residents. An article about a murder, suicide in apartment 3B in 1994, but nothing about anyone named Alice Brennan, nothing about anyone drowning in 1987. Maybe Rebecca made it up, maybe it was all in her head. But Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that she was being watched. All day, as she unpacked her camera equipment and set up her makeshift studio, she felt eyes on her. When she looked in the bathroom mirror, she thought she saw movement behind her. When she opened the closet, she thought she heard breathing that wasn't her own. She told herself she was being ridiculous. She was letting Rebecca's paranoid journal get inside her head. But that night, when she finally climbed into her bed and turned off the lights, she felt it. A weight at the foot of the bed, as if someone had sat down. Sarah froze, her breath caught in her throat. She wanted to reach for her phone to turn on the light, but her body wouldn't move. The weight shifted slightly, and she felt the mattress dip. Then she felt it, cold fingers touching her ankle, slowly sliding up her leg. Get off me. Sarah kicked out hard, her foot connecting with nothing but air. The weight vanished instantly. She scrambled out of bed and hit the light switch, flooding the room with harsh yellow light. The bed was empty, the room was empty, but her ankle was wet, soaking wet, as if someone with dripping hands had just touched her. That's it. I'm done. I'm leaving. But when Sarah grabbed her suitcase and threw open the front door, ready to leave and never come back, she stopped. There, in the hallway, was a woman. She stood perfectly still, her back to Sarah, facing the wall at the end of the corridor. She wore a white dress that clung to her body, soaked through. Water dripped from her hair, from her clothes, forming a puddle on the stained carpet. Hello. The woman didn't move, didn't turn around. Sarah's hand gripped the doorframe so tightly her knuckles turned white. Are you okay? Do you need help? Slowly, impossibly slowly, the woman's head began to turn. Not her body, just her head, rotating on her neck like an owl, turning further than any human head should be able to turn. And when she was facing Sarah, when Sarah could finally see her face, she understood why Rebecca had never left. Why Rebecca's journal had ended mid-sentence. The woman's face was gray and bloated, her skin wrinkled and peeling like something that had been underwater too long. Her eyes were completely black, no whites visible at all. Her mouth hung open and water poured from it in a steady stream, splashing onto the floor. But the worst part was her expression. She was smiling, a wide, impossible smile that split her face nearly in half. Sarah stumbled backward into her apartment and slammed the door. She threw the deadbolt, then pushed her dresser against the door for good measure. Her hands were shaking so badly she could barely hold her phone as she dialed 911. 911, what's your emergency? There's someone in my hallway, a woman. She's hurt. I think she's hurt. She needs help. What's your address? Riverside Apartments, 6F. Please hurry, ma'am. Stay on the line. Officers are on their way. Sarah pressed her back against the wall, the phone clutched to her ear, listening to the dispatcher's calming voice. But she could hear other sounds too, scratching at her door. Slow, deliberate scratching, like fingernails on wood. She's at my door. Oh God, she's trying to get in. Ma'am, stay calm. Officers are 2 minutes away, but 2 minutes felt like an eternity. The scratching grew louder, more insistent. Then it stopped. Everything went silent. Sarah held her breath, listening. She could hear her own heartbeat loud in her ears. She could hear the distant traffic from the street below, but nothing else. Then she heard the voice, a woman's voice, wet and gargling as if speaking through water. Sarah opened the door. Sarah, how did she know her name? How could she possibly know her name? Sarah, I've been waiting for you. I've been so lonely. Rebecca wouldn't stay, but you will. You'll stay with me, won't you? The doorknob began to turn, slowly. The deadbolt was still thrown, but the knob turned anyway, metal scraping against metal. I live here, Sarah. I've always lived here. This is my home, and now it's your home too. We'll be together forever. The dresser began to slide away from the door by itself, scraping across the floor. Sarah screamed and ran to the window. She was 6 stories up, too high to jump, but she could see police lights in the distance getting closer. The deadbolt clicked open. Sarah grabbed the heaviest thing she could find, a metal lamp, and faced the door. It swung open slowly, revealing the hallway, empty. The woman was gone, but the floor was soaked with water. A trail of it leading from Sarah's door to the stairwell. Ma'am, are you still there? Sarah realized she'd dropped her phone. She picked it up with trembling hands. She's gone. The woman is gone. Officers are entering the building now. Stay where you are. 2 police officers arrived 3 minutes later. They searched the apartment, the hallway, the stairwell. They found nothing, no woman, no water on the floor. Sarah tried to explain what she'd seen, but even to her own ears it sounded insane. Ma'am, have you been drinking? Taking any medication? No, I saw her. She was right there. We're going to call for medical assistance. Okay, I don't need medical assistance. I need you to believe me, but they didn't believe her. How could they? She was just another tenant in a building full of desperate people, someone who'd probably had a panic attack or a bad dream. They suggested she call a friend, stay somewhere else for the night, then they left. Sarah stood alone in her apartment, the door wide open, staring at the spot where the woman had been. She knew what she'd seen, she knew it was real, and she knew she couldn't stay here. She grabbed her suitcase, threw in her laptop and camera, and headed for the door. But as she reached the threshold, she heard it again, the voice, closer now, right behind her. "You can't leave, Sarah. No one leaves." Sarah felt cold fingers wrap around her wrist. She yanked her arm away and ran. Down the hallway, down the stairs, 6 flights, her suitcase banging against her legs. She could hear footsteps behind her, wet footsteps, slapping against the stairs, getting closer. She burst through the front door of the building and into the street, gasping for air. She didn't stop running until she was 3 blocks away. Only then did she turn around and look back at the Riverside Apartments. There, in the window of apartment 6F, she saw her, the woman in white. Standing perfectly still, watching, Sarah never went back. She called Mr. Kovacs the next day and told him she was breaking her lease. He didn't argue. He didn't ask for an explanation. He just said 3 words that made her blood run cold. "I understand. They always leave. Always. How many tenants have you had in 6F? Silence on the other end of the line. Then, quietly, "You're the 8th this year, but don't worry. Someone else will move in soon." They always do. The rent is just too good to pass up. Sarah moved back in with her parents. She tried to forget about apartment 6F, about Rebecca Winters, about the woman in white. But 3 months later, she saw a listing online. Riverside Apartments, 6F, spacious one, bedroom, great natural light, half-price rent. The photo showed the same living room she'd fled from, the same windows, the same view of the river, and there, in the corner of the photo, barely visible, was a figure. A woman in a white dress, standing in the shadows, waiting. Sarah deleted the listing and closed her laptop, but she couldn't stop thinking about it, couldn't stop wondering about Rebecca Winters, couldn't stop wondering about all the other tenants who'd lived in 6F. Where had they gone? Had they escaped like she had, or had they stayed? She had to know. Against every instinct telling her to stay away, Sarah drove back to the Riverside Apartments 2 weeks later. It was raining, the kind of cold November rain that soaked through your clothes and chilled you to the bone. She sat in her car across the street, staring up at the building, at the window of 6F. Someone new had already moved in. She could see lights on, see a shadow moving behind the curtains, a new tenant who had no idea what they'd just signed up for. Sarah got out of her car and crossed the street. She had to warn them, had to tell them to leave while they still could. She entered the building and climbed the 6 flights of stairs, her heart pounding harder with each step. When she reached the 6th floor, she stopped. The door to 6F was open, just a crack, and from inside, she could hear crying. Desperate, terrified crying. "Hello, are you okay?" The crying stopped abruptly. Sarah pushed the door open wider and stepped inside. The apartment looked exactly as it had when she'd left it. Same furniture, same layout, but now there was someone else here. A young woman, probably early 20s, huddled in the corner of the living room. Her clothes were soaked, her hair was dripping wet, and when she looked up at Sarah, her eyes were filled with terror. "Help me, please help me. She won't let me leave. Who won't let you leave?" The woman pointed toward the bedroom. Sarah turned to look, and her breath caught in her throat. There, in the doorway, was the woman in white. But she wasn't alone anymore. Standing beside her was another figure, a woman with brown hair and paint-stained clothes, Rebecca. Rebecca Winters looked at Sarah with hollow, dead eyes. Her mouth moved, but no sound came out. Just water pouring from her lips, running down her chin, splashing onto the floor. She stayed, the woman in white said, her voice wet and gargling. Rebecca finally understood. This is where she belongs. And now this one will stay too, and then another, and another, until we're not lonely anymore, until we're all together, forever. Sarah grabbed the young woman's hand and pulled her to her feet. Run. Now, they ran out of the apartment, down the hallway, down the stairs. Sarah could hear them following. Multiple sets of footsteps now. Wet, slapping footsteps and voices, dozens of voices, all wet. All gargling, all saying the same thing. Stay with us, don't leave. This is your home now. They burst out of the building and into the rain. Sarah kept running, dragging the young woman with her until they were blocks away. Only then did she stop and look back. The Riverside Apartments stood dark against the night sky, but every window on the 6th floor was lit, and in each window stood a figure, women in wet clothes, all staring down at them. All waiting. What are they? The young woman gasped. Everyone who never left. Everyone who stayed in 6F. They're all still there, trapped. How many? I don't know. Dozens maybe, going back decades. The young woman started crying again. Sarah put her arm around her shoulders. You're safe now. You got out. That's what matters. But even as she said it, Sarah wasn't sure it was true. Because later that night, when she was back at her parents' house, lying in her childhood bed, she felt it. Cold fingers touching her ankle, and she heard the voice, wet and gargling, right beside her ear. You can't run forever, Sarah. Eventually, you'll come home. They always do. Sarah bolted upright, her heart hammering. The room was empty, but her ankle was wet, soaking wet. She never slept again, not really. She would doze off for a few minutes, then wake up gasping, certain she'd heard footsteps, certain she'd felt cold fingers. Certain she'd seen a woman in white standing in the corner. The woman from apartment 6F found help. She recovered, moved to another state, changed her name. She was one of the lucky ones, but Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that she wasn't done yet. That the woman in white wasn't finished with her. That apartment 6F was still waiting, still calling to her, and sometimes late at night when the house was quiet and everyone else was asleep, Sarah would find herself on the internet. Looking at apartment listings, looking for the Riverside Apartments, looking for 6F. The rent was still half price. It was such a good deal. Maybe she'd overreacted. Maybe it hadn't been that bad. Maybe if she went back just one more time, just to prove to herself that there was nothing there, she could finally move on with her life. Maybe. The Riverside Apartments still stands on the corner of 5th and River Street in Chicago. Apartment 6F is currently vacant. The rent is half the normal price. Great natural light, perfect for artists, and if you're interested, Mr. Kovacs would be happy to show it to you. Just know that once you sign the lease, once you move in, once you spend your first night in that apartment, you might not want to leave. Or more accurately, you might not be able to, because the woman in white is still there, still waiting, still collecting tenants who never check out, and she's always looking for company, always.